Welcome to Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk, 1180 for the best in Saturday talk radio with your host, Clay Kerner, and I'm Marty Pay. Clay, great interview with Jeremy Statt and Wesley Barrentos last week.
It was great, but we have a great guest today, so let's get to it as soon as possible.
Yep. Listen, I love their attitudes, especially Wesley's with his life over limbs philosophy. Great young men, and it was an honor to interview them last week. But today, like you say, we've got a special show. In the second half, we have Kate Eunice from the Alzheimer's Disease Association, along with Tracy Reynolds. But in the first half, we have a very special guest, author, commentator, talk show host, chairman of the Reagan Group, Michael Reagan. Michael, how are you?
I'm good, but I'm no longer at talk shows. I got out of that business.
Hey, Michael, I got to tell you, I was thinking about your dad this morning. I don't know if you saw the news, but the Olympics were awarded to Seoul in 2018. Mm-hmm. And I remember I got to go to the opening ceremonies in 1984 in Los Angeles. And I remember watching your dad going up the elevator in the back of the Coliseum. You and I know where that is. And all the way up to the top. And I can't believe that's almost been 30 years ago. That's a long time.
God, you're old.
Yeah.
You are really old.
I happen to know you're 2 years older than I am, so we'll leave it at that.
Well, you're really old.
You should see him. He really looks old, too.
So you're going to be joining us up here in Bakersfield on August 4th in the In God We Trust event. You're going to be the main speaker.
That's what I hear.
Yeah.
I hear. Yeah, I actually leave tomorrow. I'm doing a trip. I get back August 2nd.
Uh-huh.
August 4th, I'm with you. August 5th, I'm in Chicago. August 6th, I'm throwing out the first pitch at Ronald Reagan Day game at Wrigley Field with my daughter Ashley, my son Cameron. Then I pick up the kids we have on tour this summer on the Reagan Centennial. So I tell you, when August 13th, 14th, 15th roll around, I'm going to go, I need a cerveza.
Oh, yeah, at least a couple. Well, listen, I still owe you a cerveza down at the Hamburger Hamlet, so sometime in August I'll give you a call and I'll pay up.
I'm good with that.
Okay. So, listen, the In God We Trust, I mean, that's incredible. Jackie Sullivan, who I know you talked to this morning, one of our local city council members, she orchestrated that, and right now it's worked its way across to 220 cities across the country. I mean, it's incredible, just adopting our national motto.
Yeah, I mean, what a concept. In God We Trust. And it was my father who said, when we forget that we are one nation under God, we'll be a nation gone under. And we certainly have forgotten, because the other side has been winning for too many years. We're taking God out of everything and anything. Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting to see the battle that goes on when somebody just wants to put God back in the system, which was put there, by the founding fathers, if you will. I was saying to somebody just the other day, talking about this very issue, I said, first of all, where is it in the Constitution? They have no concept. There's not the Constitution. But then I said, wait a minute. If it's against the Constitution to have God on the building, God on my paper, whatever it might be, if it's unconstitutional to have prayer, then the founding fathers who wrote the Constitution had no idea what they had just done. Because they were the ones, the very first thing the Continental Congress did, the first ruling they ruled on was to pray before any of their meetings in Congress. I mean, today that would be unconstitutional, but yet the people who wrote the Constitution didn't think it was unconstitutional. And then you have a Congress that went out and raised money and allocated dollars to go pay to have Bibles produced. What a concept that would have been. Little did they know that in today's day and age that would be unconstitutional. And then you just go on and on and on from there. So our founding fathers who wrote the Constitution must have been illiterate.
It's interesting. Thomas Jefferson is the guy who, when he was president, made that issue of Bibles for the Indians because he thought it would help them in learning the ethics of our country. So, here's a guy who supposedly did the separation of church and state, and he's the guy that wanted Bibles issued for the Indians.
Right, and then they taught from the Bibles, taught from prayer books, and again, in today's day and age, unconstitutional. Our elite today would have found them just nuts. How can you teach from a Bible? Didn't you just write the Constitution? They would say, "Get behind me, Satan." That's what they'd say.
Well, we have "In God We Trust" on our dollar bills and on our coins, and we have in God in trust on our tombstones, and yet we have people that want to take it away from us and change the tombstones for our veterans, as a matter of fact.
Well, the reality of it is, I mean, people need to start, living what they preach instead of just preaching it. And I think about my dad in that respect, and Pope John Paul in that respect. People who knew the Lord's Prayer, but they were two people who actually lived the Lord's Prayer. And so I think we need more Christians living their faith instead of just quoting their faith.
Yeah, exactly. This movement that Jackie started, the 220 cities, I mean, it's really big in Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Jackie was telling me this morning that it's spread to a county in Texas. Smith County in Texas has now adopted it. So it's, one of the questions I had for you was, how come do you think this is becoming successful? I mean, it's one of those things that, I would think the ACLU would be all over it.
Well, I think it's successful because people look at the world that we live in today, and the leaders that we have, aren't getting the job done. We have less and less faith every day in our leadership, whether it be at the state level or the national level, whatever it might be, or the world level. And when you're leaderless, you start looking elsewhere for leaders, and God is pretty constant. Last time I checked.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think people are looking for that consistency, that constancy that you, in fact, find in God. You find solace there. You don't find solace in mankind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
You go to Barack Obama to be comforted.
Yeah.
You go to Jerry Brown to be comforted.
Definitely not.
That's what I do when I go to church on Sunday. I pray for Jerry Brown, but I don't pray for him to comfort me.
Unless you're a union member, right?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, you get to talk to the Vice President of the United States about that.
I didn't say that, did I? We're having a conversation with Michael Reagan. It's interesting. I have a old collection of books, and I've got the whole series of McGuffey Readers, which was the textbook used in the 19th century, and they even taught the alphabet by using the Bible. Using Bible references from A to Z, and obviously you don't see that anymore because it's supposedly unconstitutional.
Right. I mean, what did our founding fathers know? They just didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I mean, until 1954, you could actually have prayer in school, and then 1954. So it's really interesting. You look at this. I mean, when you look at it in common sense terms, from 1776 to 1954. So it basically 200 years. You can have prayer in school. Not a problem. 1954. The court rules that's unconstitutional. What changed in 200 years? Mm-hmm. Why was it constitutional when it was written and constitutional all the way up to 1954? And in 1954, it becomes unconstitutional.
Right.
I mean, so the 200 years of it was okay. Now it's not okay. Did somebody, while I was sleeping, rewrite the Constitution?
Well, you can't pray. You can't have an American flag flown anymore. Recently, you may have noticed or heard that some of the homeowners associations back east refused to allow some veterans to fly their American flag.
Well, there you go.
I don't know if you heard about it.
It goes on like that. It's like the crosses that we have on top of I drive around the United States of America. I drive around California. There are more hilltops without crosses than there are hilltops with crosses. So you see, when I go around, here's how I count them: Christian 1, atheist 53. Christians 2, atheists 412. I figure all the mountains that are crossless belong to the atheists.
Uh-huh.
I think cell phones were probably developed by atheists because they couldn't deal with the telephone poles. They look too much like the cross Christ died on.
I like that. Before we break, I want to give the phone number out for anybody who's interested in attending this event on August 4th that Michael's going to be speaking at. Let's see, the phone number here in Bakersfield is 661-587-7994, and they have a fantastic website, ingodwetrust.org. Before we hit a break, Mike, I want to talk a little bit about that Houston judge. I think Clay was trying to allude to it. The Houston judge trying to ban Jesus and God from military funerals. Can you believe that?
Yeah, well, welcome to the world that we, in fact, we live in. And it's interesting when people talk about God. I was saying to someone just again the other day, I said, God is not a religion. God is God. Mm-hmm. Religion needs God, but God does not need religion.
Right.
So if I put in God we trust as my motto, I'm not saying in Catholics we trust. I'm not saying in Methodists we trust. In Presbyterians we trust. I'm saying in God we trust. And people need to understand that. They keep on equating, God to being this or being that. God is constant. Mm-hmm. Religion needs God. God does not need religion. And my gosh, would you sit there and say in God, would you say in Presbyterians we trust? In Baptists we trust?
No.
In Catholics we trust? In Methodists we trust? In Episcopalians, my God, we trust? I mean, goodness gracious, no, we don't say that. It's in God. Mm-hmm. The omnipotent.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
Definitely. We're going to hold you for one more segment, Mike. I know how busy you are. We'll be back in a minute on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180.